All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the 1883 speaker series. My name is Mike Wozniak. I serve as the coordinator of leadership and programming in the Student Involvement and Parent Program Office. In the next 18 minutes and 83 seconds, we will learn a new lesson on leadership, as well as some advice to guide our personal and professional development. For today's speaker, please join me in welcoming the Dean of the School of Graduate Studies here at UND, Dr. Chris Nelson.
Okay, no pressure from above. Well, thank you for having me. Welcome, everybody. My God, faces from the past. The deep, dark past. Hello, Alex. All right. I also understand there's a class of students here. Is that correct? There will be a quiz later, just so you know. All right? We'll work that out, Kay. All right. So, my name is Chris Nelson. I'm the Dean of the Grad School. I have been here for probably longer than I should say. We are going to talk our way through what I've learned about leadership, whatever that might be, in the 19 years I've been at UND and the six years I've been in the graduate school. We're going to start with Calvin and Hobbes, because I love Calvin and Hobbes. Does Calvin and Hobbes mean anything, though, to the younger generations here? Who's heard of Calvin and Hobbes? Come on. Well, that's not too bad. All right. So one of the first things I'm going to set the stage with a little bit is one of our alums who gave a speech at December commencement. It'll be 2 years ago this December. Angie Freeman. Was anybody there? Anybody here? All right. I had her as a speaker in my Accelerate to Industry speaker series for graduate students. We have speakers come in and they do talk about leadership. They talk about what will make somebody successful in a professional setting, right? So I am aiming this largely at students. There is not going to be a quiz. You can feel better about that. But I am going to frame this in the terms that she put forward to us because I found them incredibly compelling. And that's what's going to happen to you as you go on your leadership journey. You're going to run into people who are going to talk to you, who are going to do speeches, who are going to say things, and some of it's going to resonate with you and some of it isn't. My own leadership style has been built over time by the people I worked with, what I liked about what many of them did, and what I didn't like about what many of them did, right? And yours will be the same. So she talked about what she calls 4 types of agility, which she also called power skills. And that's what's going to frame the talk today. So the first one she called learning agility, okay? So here we got Calvin, who's not terribly thrilled with school, right? He wants to learn only about what he wants to learn about, right? Dinosaurs. But in a leadership position, or in any position really, when you take on a new position, when you're hired after you finish your degree or whatever, it can't just be about dinosaurs. It can't just be about the one topic you most like, the one thing you're most interested in, the one thing you love to do the most in undergrad or graduate school. A lot of our graduate students I think sometimes that if you're in engineering, you're going to spend your days doing cool equations, and that's about it. That's not how you're going to spend your days. You're going to spend your days doing a lot of different things, and a lot of them are going to be meetings. And some of them are going to be listening to people like me, and I can only apologize for that. So she presented this as a series of questions, and you see them there in front of you, right? Learning agility to her and to me, as I've adopted this myself, really means a mindset, and the mindset is about continuous learning. What that means, I would argue, is being open to learning things all the time. Being open to the idea that you don't know everything, even if you're the boss, especially if you're the boss, right? You don't know everything. The world changes in a hurry. Your own area changes. Your staff may change, right? students change, the university changes, the political climate changes, all kinds of things change. You have to be open all the time to learning how to adapt to those changes, to figure out how to take in the new information that's put in front of you. There's a lot of noise out there. Some of it will be good and some of it will be not so good. But you got to figure out how to take that in and adapt it where appropriate, right? Part of that attitude is also making sure that you prioritize that for those you work with. This is an attitude that you would want not only in yourself, but in your staff, in the people that you work with, because you want them to be open to learning as well. You want them to be able to respond in an agile manner. And I'm not going to demonstrate agility here, although with Provost Link here, perhaps you would like to demonstrate some physical agility?
I'd like you to.
Well, it's fair. And yet I'm not going to. All right. So the second type of agility, or the second power skill, as Angie Freeman put it, is change agility. And here we got Calvin again. How many people in here would say they love change? What? No? Oh, all right, I got a few hands. You guys are lying, come on. All right, Calvin, that would be a change. Calvin thrives on change, or so he says. But what it turns out is, maybe not so much. What he thrives on is making other people change, right? That's not necessarily how we want to approach leadership, especially if you think in terms of learning agility again as well, right? Being open to learning new things, always. That also means being open to change, right? And here again, as I mentioned, Angie went through these as a matter of the types of questions, the type of mindset you want to have in your daily practice, right? Here, when it comes to change, how do you balance multiple factors, inputs, and make decisions? Because it's always going to be there. Even amongst your staff, there's going to be differences of opinion. Or does that not happen, Laura? We're all in agreement all the time. That's what I like. That's what I like about my job. All right. Problems are going to come up that you're not ready for, or that are anomalous. However long I've been doing this, I got a problem 2 days ago that had never happened before, a question. Never would have crossed my mind. But you got to figure out a way to deal with it, right? How do you manage change when there's no roadmap? One thing we could talk about that is affecting the university, it's affecting the grad school, it's affecting all of us, and we all have to figure out how to adapt to it, is AI, right? What are we going to do with AI in the educational setting? The thing about change agility that she stressed, and that I will too, is it has to include understanding, right? You can't just react. I mean, unless it's a split-second emergency, in which case, please react, right? But if not, you can't just be reactionary. And to give an example, I have heard myself about some professors at universities saying, well, with AI, I can never assign an out-of-class writing assignment again. I'm done. Because kids will just put it into ChatGPT or whatever the other ones are. I'm old, I don't know. And, you know, that's what writing is going to be now. Well, that, to my mind, is reactionary. Because I don't think it's based on an understanding of what the tool is. AI is a tool like anything else. And if you spend enough time looking into it, what this new change is that the media likes to tell us is the second coming of Skynet. All right, who got that reference? All right. For you younger people, that's the Terminator movies, right? So I just totally lost my train of thought because of the Terminator movies. Good God. AI, yeah. So, I mean, the change, people want us to believe that the change is almost apocalyptic, right? It's going to change everything. Is it? Let's take a deep breath and take a look at it. Let's think about it. As a tool, like anything else, like the internet, when that started, it has strengths, it has things it's good at, it also has limitations and weaknesses, right? And once you understand those, or get a handle on those, I would argue, if we go back to our paper writing example, you don't have to stop assigning papers. Bring it into the classroom. Be creative about showing students the tool, what it is and what it isn't, right? Adapt it to your practice in ways that make those things clear so that you can manage those things. You can manage the change in a way that is not simply reactive, right? Okay. I'm trying to keep an eye on my time here. Provost Link, have you ever known me to riff or ramble?
You mean like right now?
Yeah. All right. So the third bucket, as it were, for Angie that I'm talking about today is communication, right? So communication, agility, another power skill. And, well, you know, again, Calvin isn't doing so well here. He rarely does. Susie, for those who know, is his nemesis, but also kind of his crush, right? She's frustrated with him. He's not doing his work. And by the end, when she starts yelling, he hears alien noises and turns into Spaceman Spiff. Productive conversation, right? So part of the point here, I mean, this gives us a lot of different things about communication when it comes to leadership, right? And one of the first lessons about communication is it can't just be about your authority. And in fact, it shouldn't be about your authority. It should be about your ability to communicate your vision, the things that are important to moving forward from your point of view, right? But it should also be about listening, which is another part of communication that a lot of people forget about, right? Especially, it seems, in our somewhat polarized world where there's only talking at each other rather than listening, right? Part of being persuasive in communication is learning about your audience, learning about who you're talking to, understanding their needs, understanding their interests, their goals, their worries, their fears. Thankfully, Laura's never afraid of any new initiative I bring forward. I know that. Although, again, I mean, here I could, this might be a good example. I mean, when I started in the grad school, man, did I have a lot of ideas. I wanted to do just about everything at once because there was so much to do, right? Turns out you can't do that. I had all these ideas, all these new initiatives that we were going to do, the best things since sliced bread, right? And then Laura would look at me and say, have you thought this through? Or something along those lines, because, you know, she'd been in the office a long time. And I had to learn that communication is as much about listening as it is about telling or talking. It has to be. Because the important part about communication is dialogue, not monologue when it comes to leadership, right? You want people to follow you because they want to, because they respect what you do, they respect your ideas, but they also feel free and open to question you. And that gets back to some of the other agilities that she talks about, that openness to learning, that openness to learning from those around you, right? In which case, it can't any longer be about, I'm the person in authority, right? So I only worry about what I think. That is not effective leadership. An effective leader, and this is one of the hardest things there is, I would say, about leading people, is self-awareness. A lot of people struggle with self-awareness of their own flaws, of their own issues, of their own blind spots, and that gets them in trouble, right? It's not always easy to acknowledge what those are, but we all have them. And the sooner you can admit that, and the sooner you can work to overcome those, and the sooner you can rely on those around you to help you with those by talking to them about them, the better, right? An authority figure does not need to be some sort of invincible person. In fact, what a lie to tell, right? Not the best way to set an example for how to go about leadership. All right, back to Calvin. The last one is another very difficult, but maybe the most important one of all. People agility is what Angie Freeman called it, right? Another power skill. So Calvin says he's a natural leader. Of course he is. Where does he end up in the last cell frame there? It looks to me like he's in a sort of a swamp, and he's all filthy and covered in mud, and Hobbes took off because all Calvin did was say, we're going this way. Nothing else, right? Doesn't work too well. Probably 95% of my job is relationships. Building them, growing them, keeping them watered. I went with a farming metaphor, or gardening, whatever. It's all that occurred to me in the moment. As it says there, work's a team sport, but you also have to remember that you don't just have a team, you have individuals. And each one of them is different. There is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to working with other people or leading other people, because unless you understand what makes them tick to some degree, you're not going to work well with them. If I interact with Laura the same way that I interact with Rebecca or Taylor, my staff meteorologist, I get to say I have a staff meteorologist, or Julie, it's not going to work because Laura is not the same person. She doesn't have the same ideas, the same patterns of interaction as Julie does, right? So if I treat them exactly the same way in terms of how I talk with them, what I ask of them, how I ask it, it's not going to work, right? One of the more important things then in this, in terms of understanding other people, is empathy. And I can't resist talking about literature here. Provost Link will understand as a fellow English professor. There is actually a University of Toronto study that showed that reading fiction can increase empathy. So for all of those of you who are sitting there thinking, well, how do I get empathy? Read. Read some fiction, right? It'll help. Because it shows people's motivations, how they do things, why they do things, right? Empathy isn't sympathy. Empathy is about understanding. Putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, understanding where they're coming from, and to the extent that you can, adapting yourself to that, right? You can learn something from just about anybody if you give them the space to talk to you, if you give them the space to say things and listen. I worked my way through college by working construction. I built houses and then I did residential concrete. And I learned some things from some of the laziest people on that job site. Seriously. Why? Because they were always trying to find ways to get out of work. And so every once in a while, one of them would come up with an idea that was like, oh my God, that actually makes sense. We really don't have to work that hard right now. Right? I can't think of exactly what it was, but I remember it happening. I can't think of what it was because I'm old. But you have to give people that space. People are the job, right? That means relating to people. That means treating them as individuals, as people, as human beings in their own right. And that may also then mean adapting yourself to others as a way to be successful in whatever it is that you decide to do. And I'm over time, just a hair. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you for listening.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Nelson, and thanks to all of you for coming. Join us November 13th when we welcome Professor of Military Science at UND, Lieutenant Colonel Jared Budensky. Have a great rest of your week.